Good afternoon, all of you. We have an informal interaction with our honored esteemed guest, Professor Ramachandra Guha. Some of our students were not in the morning session at the seminar hall. Now we are here. He is an eminent historian, biographer, etc., etc., and a public intellectual, renowned not just in India, throughout the entire world. Accompanying him is Professor Sanjay and Pisois Pasal Ronald, and Professor Duncan, and Dr. William, and Professor Mark is not with us, he'll be back tomorrow, and Professor Joy, our own Miss lady, is here. So, thank you, Professor Guha, for willing to be with us. Very taxing time for him. They stop almost everywhere, taking pictures with him. He's like a rock star, you know. So, we'll start by getting questions from you. You ask him questions, he answers, we interact, and all that. Do we have mic there? He has agreed to take questions from you first. Okay. A mic there? Oh no, we have mic. So, I don't know if we can hear from where you are. Let's just try, wherever you stand, just speak out. If we cannot hear you, we'll take the mic to you. Because mics are engaged here and there, you know. Several technical sessions are on, so there's a lack of it. Anyway, let's just give it a try. So we start by taking questions.
Hello, Professor. It's a privilege to listen to you. I used to listen to your interview on the wire with Karan Thapar. So today I'm very happy that I could see you live. I have many questions to ask, but I will start only with 3 questions. The first one is regarding the source in writing history. Do you think oral tradition, how far is oral tradition? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Sorry. Yeah, I'm Delvin Digirate. I'm teaching in Aizawl Theological College. I'm a theologian. So my first question is, how far is oral tradition authentic source in writing history? Because here in Northeast we have so many oral traditions still floating around. How far can we use them in writing history? That is one. And what is your take on UCC, especially on Uniform Civil Code? The Uniform Civil Code, which is now taken up by the BJP government. So, what do you think about it? And then the third one is, in your opinion, what is the attitude of the central government when it comes to Northeast India, like the Act East policy? What do you think of it? Will it be good for the region, or do you have reservation? Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. They are all important questions. I'm not sure if I can answer them fully. The first question about oral history. So, the place where oral history has proved most useful is Africa. So there was a great American historian of Africa called Jan Mansina, who did a lot of oral histories, because in Africa, written records are not so easily to access. And in my work, I have not used oral histories much. I've used them a bit but mostly to supplement written records, because most of what I worked on has been based on documents, letters, manuscripts, newspaper accounts. So I am not that well qualified on the use of oral history. I've used interviews, I've used some oral histories, but I'm not really a specialist in that field. So I think it has its uses. I'm not sure that in a country like India, where there's such a depth of documentary materials, it will play as important a role, say, in other cultures like Africa. Your second question was about Uniform Civil Code. If we wanted to recognize the history of this, of course we need, I don't like the term Uniform Civil Code. I would prefer the term a civil code based on gender justice. So clearly we need a civil code based on gender justice, in which women have the same rights as men, which historically they have not enjoyed in most religious traditions. For example, when the Hindu Code Bill was reformed in the 1950s, it was the first time that Hindu women had the right to divorce and to choose their marriage partners and later to inherit property. So of course one would like that right extended to everyone. But there is an important distinction between ends and means. The end of a gender just civil code is a laudable end. But is BJP bringing about this code because they want gender justice or because they want to taunt the minorities? Right, that's not very clear. So I think the means are as important as the ends. I mean, in this case, because of having come in one country. Finally, your question about the Northeast, I think there are people like Sanjay Hazarika is here who has covered the entire region much better than me. And I think with his work and people like him and Sanjeev Barua and Sanjay Lang and others who have tried to make Indians in the mainland aware of the richness, the diversity, the cultural traditions, the political problems of the different northeastern states. I think it's very, very important. I think it's important for Indians from the mainland to come here. Now what is happening is, because of limited job opportunities here in the northeastern states, because of ethnic conflict and so on, because of the international situation, there's a lot of out-migration. So young people, young Mizos, young Nagas, young Manipuris, young Khasis know about the rest of India. They go to Delhi, they go to Bangalore, they go to Hyderabad, they go to study, they have a far greater knowledge of the rest of the country than the rest of the country has about it. So I think there has to be a two-way exchange of people for mutual understanding. And one of the reasons I've come here is I've never come to Mizoram before, I've been to other states. So I think there has knowledge is the root of understanding. So knowledge is the root of understanding. And I think past governments, often there is, among mainland Indians, there is often ill-informed prejudice about people in other parts of India as in other parts of the world. And it's not just about the Northeast, I come from South India. Now what do North Indians think about South Indians? They are dark, they eat with their hands, and they have not, South Indians may think about North Indians, they are loud, they are abusive, so all of us carry prejudices about people from different parts. And the only way to overcome that is by challenge, by friendship and challenge. To befriending people of another state, another religion, another caste, another gender, and by travel. So I think that's very, very important. I think very important for that kind of exchange to take place. As I said, people from Mizoram, Nagaland, Manipur, Meghalaya, they go elsewhere in India to be educated, to work. So they are not parochial. But how many Punjabis come here? How many Tamils come here? How many of them can distinguish between the 7 states, for example, properly? So I think travel is really a route to understanding and hence, to greater self-awareness.
A wide protest, a civil unrest against the implementation of the Rules of Citizenship Amendment Act. So I would like to know your opinion. What's in it for the Hindus? Is it derogatory and discriminatory towards the Muslim community? And because last time I heard you were detained because of this, so I would like to know your stance given the current issue, the current scenario.
One more question. Someone had a question.
Good afternoon, sir. Sir, coming. Sir, I'm a student of history here, Sumit. I'm originally from Dehradun. And from my childhood, sir, I've read your articles in the newspaper, Amar Ujala, in which you were the columnist. And, sir, even right now, in my childhood closet, I would have your cutting of your article right now. So it's very honor for me to actually stand here and ask the question to you. So, sir, I want to ask you about the land law bill or PUC in Uttarakhand, land law, sorry, land law bill, the land law.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. The PUC Act or the land law.
I don't know much about it, so I can't answer it.
Okay, sir.
I'm sorry.
No problem, sir. Then the other question was the same as CA. You can answer the same. Thank you, sir.
CAA I have written in the past, and I would say again, it's an unconstitutional act because it discriminates against a particular religion. It's also illogical. You know, the idea of the CAA is to be spiteful towards Muslims and particularly single out Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan. It's illogical because the largest group of stateless people in India are Tamils from Sri Lanka. And the CAA does not give them any refuge. I mean, they are the victims of the civil war. Many of them are actually Hindus and they are not helped by this. So it's a bizarre, illogical act used for political purposes to polarize Hindus and Muslims. I mean, that's really the aim of the CAA. On Uttarakhand, you know, I grew up there, but unfortunately I have not been following it very much. But let me use this opportunity to go back to the question raised by the first lady there on relations on India, the rest of India and the Northeast. And with your permission, Professor Sharma, I'd like to ask Sanjay Hazarika to reflect on it because he spent much of his life expanding the understanding of the Northeast, both to people like me who live in other parts of India, but also people in the Northeast who may not know much about other states. So Sanjay, I think you're so well placed to answer this question. How do we best nurture an atmosphere of mutual understanding and respect between the Northeast and the rest of India?
I think they've come to listen to you rather than to me. There were a few points I wanted to share. One is that the Northeast also, what we call the Northeast, north of what, east of where? It's always a question. Northeast was a term developed about 150 years ago, dictated by British commerce and colonial interests. It was Northeast of Rangpur, which is now in Bangladesh. But I think one of the fundamental problems is that we don't know ourselves very well. We don't know not ourselves, each other very well, whether it's within the same state or in other states. So if you think of Assam, I think we think of borders. But there are a large, it's a large state with many educational institutions. There's a lot of infrastructure which is being built, and there's a lot of antagonism which is developed towards specific religious groups as a result of a political drive, campaign. When we think about Mizoram, I mean, I went to Longklai and Siaha, all these areas. You're from Longklai? Yes. Many years ago, and they were complaining that Mizoram doesn't treat us right. I said, I thought that Delhi didn't treat the Northeast right. You know, it was a stepmother in Delhi and stepchildren in the Northeast. But then within our own states, within our own region, we treat each other in ways that certainly could be improved. So I think these are two very basic things. The third point is what Professor Guha referred to earlier about many people from the region going out to travel, to work, to live, to marry, to settle, to study in other parts of the country. And you find them in the most unlikely of places, not just Bangalore, Bengaluru or Delhi, the usual places, but you'll find them in a place called Viraj in Maharashtra. You'll find them in a small town near Jaipur. You'll find them in Mysore town itself, city. So I think by that movement, people are indicating two things. I'm sure. Can I just have a show of hands? I'm sorry, this is not a class, but just, how many of you plan or are thinking of working, studying, living outside of Mizoram? Don't be shy, it's not only here against you. Only 3 or 4. Okay, I'll close my eyes. Alright. So I assume that some of you will travel and live outside. And I think that's essentially the fundamental way, as Ram was saying, the fundamental way of learning about the country and its prejudices and its challenges and problems. Because in Jamia, I founded a Center for Northeast Studies in Jamia some years ago. One of the first studies we did was a survey of women from the Northeast, from this region, I'm sorry, and the prejudice they faced, the sexual harassment they faced, and what were their own plans. When 88% said they'd been harassed, but none of them said they wanted to go back. In fact, they said we want to ask our friends, family and others to come here because the opportunities outweigh the risks. So this is something that we all need to think about. The challenges of risks, but the opportunities that come with those risks. And I think many of our people, young people, are taking great challenges forward, accepting these challenges and taking them. And one thing which is true now, more than any other time, after the Nidio Tania incident, I'm sure you've heard about it, this young man from Ramachandra, because of the color of his hair and dispute in a place called Rajpat Nagar in Delhi, he was beaten and he died of the attack on him. And that is proved to be a trigger point for mobilization. Nobody can, I think, discriminate against a person from the region in terms of race, color, or dress without that person or group of people complaining to the police. 20 years ago, people who are in JNU, Delhi University, there were 200 or 300 teachers in Delhi University and JNU from this region, in Ambedkar. Nobody would say, now nobody even thinks twice about going and complaining to the police. So I think that itself is a statement, which is not exactly a statement of faith in the system, but it shows that constitutional processes and legal processes are accessible to people. And they are more faith in them than perhaps I had ever been.
Thank you so much, Professor Joe. Shall we request Professor Joy to respond to it also? Please join a bit. Professor Hazarika is both an outsider and insider. He's from Assam, but he lived in Delhi most of the time. Same is the case with Professor Joy. And his own Mullah and then a Delhiite. And a learned professor. You are the right person to give us a perspective on how to deal with that. Why don't you give your insights into it? Shall we request? Let's go.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So I was asked to talk about my experiences about bridging the gap between Northeast and the rest of the country. And as an insider, as a Mizo, I just want to, and we were talking about this at lunch as well, which is that I think amongst all the people from the Northeast, people from Mizoram seem to be the most reticent. I mean, from amongst all the students that I've taught at JNU, reticent and sort of, what's the word that I would use? I mean, much more inward looking and much more focused on the community, even when they go outside to Delhi, you know, as compared to people from other communities. So I think this is something that we really need to think about. It could be something to do with our educational system. It could be something to do with the way we are brought up. And it could be something to do with how we place values on the way we understand our value system, which is very inward looking. You know, we do not think too much about the outside world. So I think these are things that our education system needs to tackle in order to be able to think of ourselves as being a part of India. We always come to India, to Delhi, as a bit from an outsider's perspective, almost like a foreigner coming to Delhi, you know? So, and I think that is an attitude that we have to sort of break free from. I think that's from an insider's point of view, I would say. And from an outsider's point of view, I must say that especially in academic circles, there is a much greater opening towards learning more about the Northeast. If you think about works on the Northeast, I think the past 20-30 years have brought a lot of sort of understanding about the region, both from scholars from the region, but as well as from scholars from outside the region. And I think that is a really welcome area. As far as the politics of it goes, we know, as has already been mentioned by Guha, that Professor Guha, that you know, a lot of this development that is coming into the region usually seems to benefit other people. So I think we have to be very careful about whether the developments that are being promised to the region will actually benefit the people of the region. And I think we have to be extremely wise about that in the way we make our decisions. I think people from the Northeast, we tend to fall prey to is this, we are sold out to development very easily. You know, we are sold out to development very easily. Once we know that there is a road coming, or there is some accessibility being provided, or there is money coming in certain ways, we are able to give up everything for that. And we need to think a bit about this a little bit more carefully. I know it's very difficult, especially for people who are struggling, and it's very easy to say yes to all of it because we think that we're going to be beneficiaries. But I think we need to have, you know, higher ideals and just to be able to see objectively whether such things will really benefit us in the long run or not. I don't know whether that was what I was supposed to say, but I think that's what I'm saying for now.
Professor Joy. So I thank you. Professor Hazarika wishes to say something. Then we go on to the round of question.
Sorry to take up that. I just want to say a couple of things. I don't think that the rest of India, that Delhi has acknowledged the generosity with which Mizoram has welcomed the Chin refugees and displaced people from Manipur. I think that's an extraordinary Okay. Did you hear me? Okay. You didn't hear. So, I said that I think the rest of India, certainly Delhi, has not acknowledged the generosity and largeness of heart with which the Mizo people and the state governments, successive governments have welcomed the Chin refugees from Myanmar and also from the displaced people from Manipur. I think that's an extraordinary step for a small community and a small state to do it as an example really for the rest of the country in terms of bigness of heart. That's one. The second thing is this is really connected with the Act East policy, which you asked about, man. Because if you don't have a policy that includes problems of dealing with problems such as displacement and refugee movements, of people who see themselves as kin, then you don't really have much of a policy. Because as of now, today, the government of India is not negotiating or not dealing with the ruling forces which are on the border of Mizoram and Myanmar on our east and their west, which is basically the Chin Defense Force or the Chin National Army, because there is no existence of the Myanmar government along that stretch. So if you have a policy, you would engage, but there's no engagement, and many of the things that the government of India has set up, invested money in, like the Caledine project, are abandoned and completely in hands of one or the other of the militant groups, the very powerful armies, ethnic armies in Myanmar. So that also needs to be born in.
Thank you, Professor Hazarika. Anything is to, yes.
Manipur, I come from a place called More, which is a commercial town bordering Myanmar, where all these trade routes, which we call the Asian Highway or whatever, the transnational, trans-Siberian or whatever. Yeah, Friendship Highway. So as someone coming from that place, I am very sure that when we talk about look is or act is, they are definitely looking at my place as well. So my personal opinion is, I think all these policies reflect the center's attitude towards Northeast. And also, Professor Guha, what is your observation about the center's attitude towards the Northeast through all these policies? And in reality, our livelihood or our forests and everything, it's transforming. And our communities are becoming more and more polarized. And in the midst of all these, it has become extremely difficult for people to come together and to assert our voices or ourselves. And given the current political climate of the country where voices of dissent are being suppressed. So taking all these factors together, how do you think, or what kind of strategy should we, people like tribal from the Northeast or whoever are affected by development or whatsoever, should we take up? Like like so that we don't get behind the bars or whatsoever.
Thank you. Thank you for that very important question. You mentioned the Look East policy. And I'd like to give a slightly historical perspective on this. Indian intellectuals, that is, ever since modernity came with the Europeans. So the British were the first, of course we had the Dutch, the Portuguese, and the French, and then the British, who, through which we encountered another civilization that was stronger than us militarily. And so when Indian intellectuals began to encounter the modern West, or the modern world, when India was no longer isolated but part of a global global conversation, Indian intellectuals started looking west. So Ramachandra, for example, who was a very remarkable reformer, looked towards England. You can get me, right? Okay. Yeah. But if you look at Indian intellectuals, their whole orientation was westwards. And not necessarily only admiring the West, but sometimes having a relationship of appreciation and criticism. So Gandhi goes to London to study. Nehru goes to Cambridge to study. Ambedkar goes to America and England. So that was, you may say, the default position of the Indian intellectual was look west. Where did look east come from? Now, again, this is something I would like to alert you to because it's important for a historian to bring in some new perspectives from the past, not only talk about current politics. The first Indian writer or intellectual to say India must look east as well as west was Tagore. So, unlike Gandhi, unlike Nehru, unlike Ambedkar, unlike Rammohn Roy, unlike Mizo, Naga intellectuals, who of course experienced the West through Christian missionaries, who were either Welsh or American or British. Tagore said, India must also look east. So and that is Tagore's greatness. But there are many things that are great about Tagore which people do not know because people just think Tagore was a poet, he wrote Bengali songs, and they don't know what an extraordinary rich understanding of the world he had. Of course he looked west. He went to America 4 times, but he went to Japan 4 times also. He went to China more than, I think, 3 times. He went to Java, Indonesia. He also went to South America, which no Indian intellectual went. So Tagore got out of, said we must not only look west, we must also look east. And I think, he went to Myanmar, he went to Thailand. So he saw that India's historic connections with the East were older than those with the West. We had known the West only as conquerors or missionaries, soldiers or missionaries. But the East we had gone as traders, as religious thinkers. Buddhism went from India to the East and so on. So I think that's one thing I should like to just put in your mind. That Tagore was the first great Indian who told us we must look east as well as west. Don't only look west, because otherwise we are all looking west. Okay. Similarly, Tagore of course is he first goes to Japan in 1916. And he first goes to China in the 1920s. He visits Java in 1927, before independence. He is looking east. But after independence, Nehru briefly looked east, but only towards China. The first Prime Minister to say, let's look east, was Narasimha. And we have forgotten, he is a forgotten Prime Minister, for many reasons, because the Congress does not like him because he does not belong to the Gandhi family. And of course the BJP maybe doesn't understand him. But he, I think, was part of his vision was we must look east. We must learn from what countries like South Korea, Taiwan, Vietnam have done. How they have become economically so dynamic after independence. And also we must build trade routes with, Myanmar, through Bangladesh, etc. So I think Tagore and Narasimha Rao deserve credit for going against the grain, the conventional way of thinking, which is we must only look west. All good things happen in the west. India's natural default mode of engagement is with Europe and America. So that's how Blue Key started. And then we'll talk about Moray. So then there was talk about trade, but of course it's a complicated situation because Myanmar has known so many civil wars and so on and so forth. This government, I don't think believes in Blue East. I think this government believes in looking at itself. It's a very narrow, inward-looking government and saying, I am looking at myself and I am great. I am the greatest person in the world. I am the greatest religion. So they are pretty. So I think we have to recover the vision of Narasimha Rao and Tagore to see how we can, really have a properly creative Look East policy. Because many of our, in this part of the world, you have such, rich cultural, social ties, religious ties, with trading ties, economic ties with the countries that border to the east. So that's how I would put it. I think it's very important to remember Tagore in this regard because he taught us to look east. That we have, India has many points of similarity and contact with Southeast Asia, with China of course, but also with Southeast Asia. I think that vision of Tagore somehow needs to re-enter our imagination.
Yes, you can hear me. I'll just introduce myself as a local guy. I'm from Aizawl here. I'm a bureaucrat. And seeing you here in person is giving me great joy. For the first time, I'm Sanjay Hazare. After a gap of 15 years, I'm seeing him. I've attended one of his seminars. Sir, in my entire life, I have stolen only two things. One was this book, which I bought today, and I hope to get it signed by you. I bought it from a friend, and I got so engrossed into it that I refused to return it till today. It has been with me for around some 10 years now. So that's the first thing I stole. And the second is my wife's heart when I was doing her. And that's the only two things I've done. And sir, I'll get to my question now. My first question, sir, you touched upon it a little bit in your reply in the previous question. The free movement regime is being scrapped as we know it, and the border fencing of the Indo-Myanmar side is being mooted. I would like to hear your take on that. What I have thought is India as a country, since you spoke that we have cultural affinity with people living in Myanmar, what I had always thought was that why not India go for expansion in these areas where there are cultural and ethnical homogeneity? America has done great through her cultural invasion. So why can't India adopt that kind of policy in these areas is one of my thoughts. And I'd like to hear your thought on that. And my second question is on cricket. I would like to hear your take on the Indo-Bangla relationship in the context of cricket. Because what we have learned in the textbook, that India has given birth to Bangladesh, India is Bangladesh's mother, all these things are learned in the textbook. But when India goes to Bangladesh, say for some the Tri-Series, Asia Cup and all these things, what I have seen in the early 2000s is whenever India plays with Pakistan, the loudest cheer has always been reserved for the Pakistani team and not the mother state. So I don't know, I'd like to get that clarified from you. And my last question, sir, is I would like to hear your projection and prediction for the upcoming Lok Sabha election.
On this proposal to fence the border, I think it is 2,400 kilometers. That's the proposal, something like that. It's completely crazy. There's a very good article which you may have read, but if you not, please read it, by Ambassador Gautam Mukhopadhyay, critiquing that proposal. Ambassador Gautam Mukhopadhyay is someone who knows this area very well. He was our ambassador in Myanmar, and he also is the son-in-law of Manipur. His wife is a Guha, and he has a home there. So he understands this issue intimately, and this fencing of the border is something that will create problems for all the northeastern states, not just for Manipur. So I think it's really mystifying why they are doing it. Your second question on Bangladesh, India has a record of very poor relations with its neighbors. You're right about Bangladesh that the Indian government and the Indian army played a critical role in gaining Bangladesh independence, and yet we have such bad relations with them. With Nepal, which is in theory also a country with a Hindu majority, we have, so somehow the smaller countries in the region, Sri Lanka is another, Maldives, the Indian government has historically acted in an overwhelming manner, almost like a bully. And that has really been very, very counterproductive. On the elections, I don't, we'll have to see. I just say this, that even if the Modi government wins a third term, as I like to do, I think we must fight for our values democratically, non-violently, because large parts of the country are not ruled by the BJP. I come from the south. Not a southern state is ruled by the BJP. So even if the Modi government wins a majority based on what seats it wins in North and Western India, I'm not going to stop voting by me, because our views are, So I think pluralism is very important in a democracy. And whatever happens in the elections, we should not lose sight. Our strength is our diversity. Sanjoy mentioned that each of our states is also very diverse. We can talk about Assam. But my state, Karnataka, people think Karnataka is Bangalore and IT. But there are at least 5 distinct regions of Karnataka. There's the coastal region. There's the Western Ghats, which is like the Mizo Hills. Then there is the northern Deccan. Then there's the Kaveri Delta in the south. And then there is the city of Bangalore. So even so much diversity, even in Karnataka, that you can't treat Karnataka as one. So much cultural, ecological, social diversity. And India is a land that must glory in its diversity, including diversity of political views. We must not succumb to an ideology which says we must all dress the same way, eat the same food, worship the same God, speak the same language. I think that is not in our best interest at all.
Sir, I want to ask you one question. I have this question 6 years ago when reading the makers of modern India. I was posted at Assam for counterinsurgency operations. I was at North Assam region. So during our operations and when we go out, I used to brought up the book. I even used to read under the footlight. So that I was alone. So it builds my time also. So that's this question. Is that in favor of modern India, we present a collection of writings by key figures who shape the nation's history. So I want you to share a particular anecdote or insight from your research from all these eminent individuals that significantly influence your understanding of India's evolution and perhaps surprise or challenge your initial perceptions. So I want to ask you about that.
So the question was about my anthology makers about India. There are 19 people and who are influential in different ways. Of course, I included, it could have been instead of 19, 25, 30, I had to be selective. But I tried to include a diversity of views, and particularly some of the feminists are included. I mean, there are some men who are progressive on the question of women's rights. I mean, Nehru, Ambedkar, and Ramachandra Roya, 3 men in that book who are in favor of gender equality. But there are 2 feminists, Tarabai Shinde and Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay, whose views particularly struck me. And I wish people read more about them. Because we know enough about Ambedkar and Nehru and Gandhi, even without my book. People reading them. But the early feminists and their views, and Periyar also, I think Periyar's views on contraception are so important and so visionary that in the 1930s he's talking about the importance of contraception, which the Catholic Church even today does not, want to accept. So that was really my experience, that several of the less known thinkers, not Gandhi, Ambedkar, Nehru, Tagore, because they're quite well known, but some of the lesser known thinkers and their perspectives, I think those are what impressed me, and I hope readers can likewise have the same feeling.
You can distribute those fruity packets, right? Fruities, some called remain seated. We take questions. Yes, please. Please to reach yourself.
Semester. From seeing your name in books to seeing you in real life feels like a dream. I'm really honored to see you in person. So I got 3 questions. My first question is on bridging the gap between Northeast India and Central India. What is the first thing we can do to face the challenge of cross-cultural sensitivity while sticking to our tradition, norms, and values? And my second. And sir, I have attended the seminar where you speak about history beyond chauvinism. It was spoke about 6 chauvinism which historians must overcome. And what is in your opinion, what is the most important skill for historians to possess? And my third question is, when analyzing primary sources, for you it's newspaper, and how do you prove their validity? How can we trust the accuracy of any historical event when they happened years ago, when even today's happening and events are disputed by us who has lived through them? Thank you, sir.
I think the first question many people have answered already. Travel, understanding, maybe friendship. I think maybe going to study here, going to some other place to study so that you have the experience of meeting people from other states. I think that's really the only thing I would say. What was your second question? How do you represent the past when there are many different variants of even today? An event is, look at from different perspectives what the Japanese film director Kurosawa called the Rashomon effect. Depending on where you're looking, you will get a certain view. The answer to that is you must have a diversity of sources, not just rely on one source. For example, if there is an event, you don't have just one witness, have 6 or 7. And from a diversity of sources, you can construct what I call a plausible version of what happened. I said this in the morning, unlike a mathematician. a historian cannot achieve absolute truth. But he can at least present a plausible version of what happened. Not perfect, not plausible. I said again in the morning that some other historian will come and do more diligent research, dig deeper in the sources, and maybe come up with a better version. So history is a process of conversation, dialogue, argument, and the deeper you dig and the more diversity of sources that you use, the more plausible your account will be. That's all I can say. No, so you talked about newspapers. So I think, again, obviously you'll have to cross-check what the newspaper reports with what other sources are saying.
Hello, very special honor to meet you. I am H. Jubilee, second semester, Department of Political Science. Sir, I would be very glad if you can tell us your perspective on the clash between environmental introspection and in-depth historical narrative, and how understanding environmental conservation and in-depth historical narratives, and how understanding the past can inform the present day environmental justice.
I think Professor Pachau might answer that tomorrow. You'll speak a little bit about environmental history tomorrow? Yeah. I think it's, again, we talked about that. I think historians have, in the morning also this question came up, that the natural world, the biophysical world, I think is something that historians have ignored. So I'll give an example from this room. Now, a sociologist looking at this room might start studying, where are these different students from? Which parts of Mizoram? Which religious denomination? Is their family devout or are they atheistic? How many of them have a background in science and so on? So we'll restrict that. But if you look at the room as a biophysical entity and leave the human beings from here, imagine none of you are here, but say, where does that table come from? Where did the wood come from? Where was the electric light made? Where was the energy generated? You'll get a very different perspective on history. You may say an environmental perspective on history, on how natural resources have been exploited for human consumption and what are the consequences of this likely to be. So, I think this is a new dimension of historical research, which I didn't talk about in the morning, which a field that has emerged only in the last few decades, which is the history of the non-human world, not just human interactions with the non-human world, but the evolution of the non-human world. I think that's something which is an expansion of our historical imagination, so that we don't only write about human beings, we write about other species too. I think that's something which is a new field of history that's only now emerging. And then one last question here, sir. Sir, you got a question? Yeah.
Hello? Hello?
In your critique of Anna Hazare, you made the comment that the problems, social change will not be addressed by a super sarpanch or a super cop. I think you had a reference to H.C. Sangya and that. Super cop, maybe? Alright. Now, these figures are actually media creations, I think. And especially in light with what Duncan led us to think about this today, about mediated spaces and how the mobile media world has shaped the way things have changed. Would you say, not so much about the effectiveness of social change, but how these media-created figures, metonymies of culture maybe, they are something that seem to register very effectively, especially in the political processes. For example, the media is dominating the media landscape, especially through the legacy media houses. The BJP campaigns are really dominant. They get their message out as much as we disagree with them. I think in other places too, like in the US, it's about dominating the media landscape. So I was wondering if you would like to rethink about these images of the super cop, the super sarpanch, well, not literally that, but to think of those in light of the media, mobile media world that we are a part of. And I was wondering if Duncan could just enlighten us. I know you kind of rushed through, but how this mobile media world and the political changes around the world, especially about how who dominates that space seems to have all the political currents. So just want to okay, that one, and lastly, one thing, is there some critical development studies going on anywhere? Because we are being sucked up by, again, a media-driven message of Sabka Vikas. And I think Dr. Joy said something about Mizo's. See, like in Chhattisgarh, the Adivasis will die for their land. In Mizoram, we will clamor to get the compensation. There's something that is to be said on our side also. We will not shed a drop of blood for that. We will clamor for the land as well as compensation. So maybe there's something halfway there we need to be mindful of, be more introspective as well. Okay. I think they need you first.
Magnifying personalities. I think that's something which, in the case of Anna Hazare 15 years ago, it was this figure of dissent. You know, this alleged figure of moral probity who was going to rescue us. Today, it's not the dissenter, but the king, the royal personage, you know. And of course, that's how. So I think the media has a tendency to magnify an individual and endow him with superhuman powers. And the electronic media particularly whatever.
Thank you. There are a couple of things that came up in your question. I think the development question is interesting, right? So I've done a lot of development studies in the region, on cities, but also on infrastructure. And our earlier conversation about the peace policy, activist policy, etc. And I think you had a wonderful point, right? The Senate cares about itself, right? You can also look at that very same policy through a framework of territorial integration. It's a look-east policy, but it's also about connecting this part of the country west to the rest of it through a lot of infrastructure, right? Makes resource extraction easier, makes human resource extraction easier, right? And the frontier, the northeast, is still alive with that idea about opportunity for people in the other parts of India wanting to work in the extractive industries in particular. So then we often think of it, it's this thing about other countries. It's also about bringing this part into the national fold through much more integrated infrastructure. And I was really interested in how it works for digital urban infrastructure. So I think that there's a critique of it that has to be looked at as a territorial integration project, a national integration project as well. And so it's really interesting when people talk about bridging the gap with India, and I think this might be where your point about media becomes relevant, because when I used to work on Northeast migrants in Delhi and later work on debating race, you would meet a lot of people who would say, but why do we need to bridge the gap? Why can't we just live with difference? Why is this kind of mutual understanding so important? It's probably important at a level of citizenship, right? Because citizenship activates certain opportunities, certain quotas, certain reservations, etc. But culturally, why look there? And actually many people here don't. When you go down downtown Aizawl, Seoul store, Seoul restaurant, Seoul department goods, right? The cultural cues come from much further away. And actually that's okay. I don't think that there's much that needs to be agonized over. And that's why the media landscape to me is interesting, right? Because the media landscape to me means you can bypass the center. You connect to other parts of the world. You take your cultural cues from other parts of the world, your cues of faith from other parts of the world. your connections from other parts of the world, right? And so the kind of power of media, I think, disturbs and disrupts some of those old spatial certainties between centre and periphery, northeast and south. They don't completely get rid of them, right? The political economy, the structure of the country is too powerful for that. But they certainly disrupt them in ways that I think are important. And I think you were hinting a little bit about how does then new media operationalise politics in certain ways. And I think it does here in the ways it does in other parts of the world. But I think it also animates a counter-politics that's also readily accessible, difficult to censor, and much more readily available. So I think it opens up unconventional channels for politics, as well as empowers conventional channels. So you know what I mean? It doesn't completely alter the balance of power, but it brings new flows into the arena, is how I'd say it. But a very excellent question.
Thank you so much.